Hey guys, so today I want to talk a little bit about testing your soil for nutrient and pH value, as well as soil temperature and how that can help tell you how and when to seed your garden. So I'm just scooping out some soil here from under the manure layer that I applied last year. Got two soil samples. One is from the in-ground garden and one is from the raised bed. And I just put a little twig in one of the containers so I would know which one is which. And then I just pulled out my soil thermometer and I'll show you what that looks like. So this is reading about 9 degrees. So I'm using this rapid test soil kit that I got from, I think I bought this from Bessie's maybe, or Stokes. Anyways, I've seen them in Home Hardware as well. So we're gonna start with, I've got two soils here. You've seen me collect them in the video before. Okay. Before we begin with the nitrogen test, not the nitrogen, the pH test, sorry. I'm going to actually just put some of my tap water. I don't have distilled, so I'm just going to put, I don't think that's how it's works. I'm going to put a capsule, a pH capsule, in here. It's a little bit finicky. Basically, it's a little pill capsule, and I need to separate the two halves. This doesn't want to work very well for me. There we go. So I want to separate this and put it in the little and get all the powder in that little section there. A little bit of a dump to the side. I think that'll probably be fine. Anyways, what I wanted to do is I wanted to test the pH of my water first before I use it to compare. Of course, I didn't get everything in there. Oh well. So before I use my regular water to test whether or not, or what my pH is, I want to test what the pH is of my water all by itself. Just supposed to put this part on there and shake. And then, so it says allow soil to settle and color to develop for about a minute. I don't think my capsule has fully dissolved. Okay. So I'm looking at that and thinking we're probably right in here with just the water by itself. But I'm going to let that continue to develop while I work on the next couple of sets here. Okay, so for the pH test, you just add water to the compartment and then the soil. For the other tests, you're actually going to be using this water, which I mixed as according to directions with my soil samples yesterday to allow it to settle out. Now they want it to be as clear as possible so that you can get a good reading on the color comparator. So I'm just going to put some of this through this little sieve. Try not to disturb it too much. I could probably just pour this actually. Not entirely sure how much water I'll need. So I could just carefully pour that through. So that's sample number 1. All right. And let's revisit that pH. And it definitely looks like we're in the alkaline or pH neutral zone. There's no way we could be anywhere in here. Just the color of it is looking to me like 7.5-ish. And that's just our water, right? So I'm going to actually go ahead and dump this test. Go ahead and rinse that out. And now they want me to put just a little bit of soil in the compartment. I don't know if you can see that there. It says fill with soil. And I'm just going to put a little bit of soil in there. Because our water is already alkaline, then we should read our soil as being a little bit less alkaline than the test shows. And I should probably be redoing this with distilled water. So there's my dirt. And then we need the nitrogen, or not, I'm saying nitrogen because it's green, but it's actually the pH test that's green. I like how these little capsules and compartments are color coded so that I know what I'm doing. And grab another capsule. This time try not to spill everything. And then you're supposed to fill it up with water to the fill line. Once again. And this is the same water I just tested. Alright. It's well on there, and we're going to shake that up. And as you can see, it's not easy to read at the moment, so again, we're going to let that sit over there and settle out. In the meantime, I'm going to start with our nitrogen test. So nitrogen is purple. Theoretically, there shouldn't be a whole lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, or potash in my water, and so I'm not going to do a comparison. Alright, remove the cap. Okay, let's just add water, the water from the thing first, okay. So we're supposed to use the test water. And fill it up to the soil line. Not the soil line, the fill line. And there we go. And then you add the capsule in. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these. It says to shake and then let them sit for about 10 minutes for the color to develop. So that's what it looks like at the moment, and then I will do the rest in fast forward, and then we can revisit the results after. Alright guys, so it's been almost 10 minutes and we can have a look. As you can see, I really should have done this test with distilled water, but I'm going to say this is actually more blue than either of these colors, and it's a bit more blue than the water by itself was, so I'm going to go ahead and say that the soil is at least slightly alkaline because it is making the water more alkaline than it already was, and therefore it's at least at neutral and probably a little bit more alkaline than neutral. Now with these guys, it can be a little bit difficult because the soil, the water that we used for the test already had color to it. So I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put some of the test water in here, and then we can see the comparator chart with the test water in it and see if that helps to clarify the levels. I'm not sure that this is what you're supposed to do, but it seemed to make sense in my brain. That way I get a good comparison even though the water isn't perfectly clear. So I'm gonna say my soil is somewhere between these two. Definitely there isn't a surplus of nitrogen in here. So I'm gonna say it's in the deficient to depleted range. That doesn't really surprise me too much. I'm gonna go ahead and just do the rest of these tests. Phosphorus looks a little bit more promising. Back on there. So, and I'm going to say it's in this range. It's actually between adequate and deficient. It's probably on the deficient side here. Just given that color range there. And then do the same for the potash test. I'm not going to bother filling that all the way up because I know it's definitely not in the surplus range. And I'm going to say we're again in this range between deficient and depleted. So as you can see, the soil, and that's from the raised beds, is actually quite poor. And that is what I expected it to be. Alright guys, so I went ahead and did the test for the in-ground beds. This is pretty much just a surface test of the manure that we laid down last year. So let's have a look at the results. So here, I don't know if you can see the color on this, but it's actually matching this color quite well. What that's telling me is that this is a slightly acidic solution because this was already, the water by itself was already alkaline. And so because it has become lighter in color, it's probably even more acidic than that because it has had a reaction to make the water less alkaline. So I'm going to go with, this is probably a slightly acidic solution, around 6.5. That's pretty good. I'm very happy with that. And you can see here in the nitrogen, we do actually have some pink in there. It's not just clear. So I'm thinking we're going towards deficient and adequate. Probably still a bit on the deficient side, but it's promising to see that there's actually some pink in there. And again, with the phosphorus, I think we're looking at adequate to sufficient there. I'm really encouraged to see that the manure actually has some really good nutritional value for our plants. And then again, with the potash, we're looking at it at the very least adequate, I think. And that looks good to me. I'm very pleased with that. So, given what these all look like, I think the in-ground beds with the manure are probably all right for the most part. I know the soil underneath that is very poor, because the soil underneath that will be pretty much the same as the soil that I got out of our raised beds. And I have top dressed all of the raised beds with manure as well, but it obviously hasn't been trickling through into the soil underneath, and that's one of the things I wanted to know. So I do need to address a nitrogen deficiency for my really nitrogen hungry plants. So it wouldn't be a bad idea for me to put a mixed slow release organic fertilizer down, especially for the hungry plants. But it's encouraging to me to know that there is nutritional value in the manure, and that over time that'll trickle down into the soil underneath as well, and we can improve it over time. So I used the soil thermometer that I showed earlier to decide when to direct sow into the garden. My soil temperature in the raised beds is between, I think last time I checked it was 9, and in the in-ground garden it's at 7. So at that temperature, I can actually sow quite a lot. Lettuce seed will actually germinate at a temperature of 4 degrees Celsius, which is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And then there's a whole bunch of things that will start at 7 degrees Celsius. That includes cabbage, carrots, cauliflower, garlic, peas, radishes, and spinach can all be sown at 7 degrees Celsius, which is 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and they can germinate at that temperature. So once the soil is that warm, you can definitely start sowing those things. After that, there's a couple of things that start at 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, things like Swiss chard, parsnips, onions, onion sets will start at that temperature, and beets. And then the next jump up is usually around 16 degrees Celsius with which is 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So at 16 degrees Celsius, tomatoes will eventually germinate. They will germinate slower in colder temperatures. Potato, so I'm going to be putting out my potatoes soon as well. Asparagus apparently sprouts at that temperature or grows at that temperature. I'm not really sure, because I'm not direct sowing my asparagus, so I'm just going to plant them out once I have no risk of frost, because the frost will kill off the new spears. Then you bump up again to, there's a couple things that will start at up to 18 degrees. That's sweet peppers, cucumber, bush beans, things like that. And then you've got your next set of temperatures at around 21 degrees Celsius. So that goes for things like broccoli, eggplant, leeks from seed. Melons start at 24 degrees Celsius, which is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Pumpkins start at 21, and then all your summer squash, your winter squash, will also start at 21 degrees Celsius. So temperature probe can be super helpful to know what your soil is doing and whether or not your seeds will germinate. You can start your seed, or you can sow your seeds before the soil is warm enough for them to germinate, but some of those things are not going to do really well until the soil is warm enough. Sweet corn, for an example, does not germinate well in cold soil, and if you put it in cold soil, it will actually be held back, whereas if you just wait a little bit longer and then sow when the soil is warm enough, they'll usually have more vigor. Beans, I noticed last year in my lower garden, where the soil was cooler, that a lot of them didn't come up at all because it was too cold for them, and so they ended up rotting in the ground instead of actually germinating. So yeah, temperature probe, super helpful. Hope this information has been useful to you guys. Let me know in the comments down below any questions you have about all this, and we'll see ya.